was a barista for almost 5 years in total. 3.5 were spent at Starbucks. I've now shifted to a full-time at-home barista where I've had a lot of time to reminisce on my barista years. All of the things I loved about those years, and yes, all of the things I disliked about those years as well. Although I came out on the other side with a plethora of crazy customer stories and interactions, I also walked away with a ton of great memories as well. But this video today is all the reasons I learned to dislike being a barista, hence the title. We've talked about all the good before on this channel, and we will talk about it again, but not now. Was it the crazy Karens? Was it the unreliable coworkers? Or was it that one time my 40-year-old manager asked to buy my... Actually, we'll talk about that later in the video. Consider this a cautionary tale in some ways. Don't say I never warned you. My final dislike in this video will be one that I believe the majority of you can relate to given where you're at in life. By this point, if you've been on the internet, you've probably seen and heard a few crazy customer, crazy Karen stories. If you're subscribed to my channel, you've probably seen about 500. I'd put money on that because realistically, Karens are everywhere. It's actually quite sad how many people act like that in public. And I say people because contrary to popular belief, it's not always just women. A lot of men are actually pretty guilty of mistreating service workers. I loved my time as a barista, but something I don't miss is being treated disrespectfully by so many different people for so many years. You do not realize how nasty people can be until you're working in a customer-facing position. Lucky for baristas, we are typically either the first face or last face that somebody sees in their day. You get them at their worst, their sleepiest, their I had a bad day, so I'm gonna take it out on you. Yeah. You see it all. Now, you learn pretty quickly as a barista, or really in any customer-facing position, that usually, hopefully, it's nothing personal. Sometimes, some people are just in a really mood, and all you can do is just grit your teeth and bear it, and serve them with a smile. That's the job. And the hope is that you love coffee enough to not want to quit on the spot after a crazy Karen interaction, because yes, they do happen several times a day. As a barista, it is inevitable that you're gonna come across some really rude, nasty people that won't treat you with an ounce of kindness. And it sucks. I won't discredit that. When that drive-through bell goes off in your ear at 5 a.m., you always pray that it's a morning person, a very chipper morning person. More often than not, it's not. Best case scenario, morning person. Worst case scenario, well, I will let you imagine what that looks like at that hour. As you get deeper into the job though, you do start to get over it, and even when you do have moments where those crazy interactions bother you, you get over it a lot quicker. Remember, it's never anything personal, and you just gotta serve them with a smile at the end of the day and get them out of your line no matter how much you want to dropkick them. Because yes, I have thought about dropkicking a Karen multiple times. For legal reasons, I didn't say that. Speaking of 5 a.m., it's also no secret that baristas wake up very, very early, like 4 in the morning early. That might be some of your guys' normal wake up times. For me, no. I'm a morning person, but not that much of a morning person. And during those years as a barista, I was not a morning person at all. At least now I enjoy the, 8 a.m. wake up. That's as early as I'll go. I'll probably never be a 4 a.m. morning person. Psychos. I don't know how people do it. If you're not a morning person, then prepare to work some very odd hours as a barista. One of my cafes opened at 5 in the morning, which meant we had to be there at 4:30 in the morning, which meant my first alarm started going off at 3:30 a.m. To me, 3:30 in the morning, that's not morning. That's the dead of night. That is the bewitching hour. That is the devil's hour. I am a child of God. I do not need to be up at that time. Working an opening shift is not fun. Unless, of course, you're a morning person and that's your usual schedule, then you'll have a great time. The good news is that usually when you work those kinds of crazy hours, you're usually off by like 11 a.m. noon. You have the rest of the day to yourself, which is nice, but still, you woke up at 3:30 in the morning. How energetic are you gonna be? If closing sounds more like your thing, well, prepare to work some late nights then. Realistically, what I'm trying to get at here is that working as a barista, your schedule is never really consistent. One day you could be expected to wake up at 3 in the morning and get to your shift by 4:30 in the morning. The next day you could be expected to be at your shift by 4 p.m. and you're there until close to midnight. And by the way, if you have poor management, they might also try to get you to clope-in. A clope-in means that you close the night before and you open the next day. At certain cafes, depending on your hours, that might only be 4 or 5 hours in between when you leave and need to be back. Although I'm pretty sure that's illegal to not have at least 8 hours in between shifts, some management, they don't care. They just want to know that there's a warm body there to close the store and to open the store. They don't care about what you do in between and if you only get 3 hours of sleep. This is actually a perfect segue into my next point though, all about unprofessional management. Something that I ran into at a couple of my cafes was very unprofessional management. Is that the norm? I don't think so. I'm going from a very small sample size of 4 cafes. 2 out of the 4 cafes, though, had unprofessional management, which statistically speaking, that's 50%, so that's not great. To be fair, though, management at cafes and Starbucks are typically pretty young people. And typically, somebody who is 23 years old might not be the best manager. And that's coming from someone who is currently 23 years old. Early 20-somethings, sometimes they just don't have the experience. They don't have the leadership skills in order to lead and manage an entire crew of people. Why Starbucks and other coffee chains decide to promote their 20-somethings to management positions, I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea in some cases. Obviously, some people are more equipped for the job than others, but it wasn't just 20-something-year-olds. I also had 30-something, 40-something-year-old managers that were just as unprofessional, if not more. Get a load of this shit. So there was one time that my 40-something-year-old manager asked to buy my birth control off of me. Yeah, I was 17 years old at the time. I was a senior in high school, and my manager and her husband were going on some vacation, romantic vacation, and she wanted to be extra safe, and she wanted a pack of my birth control. And she did not want to get herself prescribed. She wanted the easy route, which was just buying it off of me. Even after I explained to her that birth control isn't exactly like a one-size-fits-all pill, it's not like Advil, she didn't care. She was very adamant about buying it off of me, and she even offered to bake me a cake in addition to giving me cash. Long story short, if you're wondering, no, I never got paid for it, and no, I never saw the cake that was promised to be baked for me. So if this is your sign to not deal birth control to your Starbucks manager, let this be your sign. But when I reflect back on that, I'm honestly like, what in God's green earth was my 45-year-old manager? Like, what was she doing asking me, 17, to buy birth control pills off of me? Like, why was that happening? Unprofessional. Management also had a very hard time respecting time off. On my days off or on my vacation time, I was called to see if I was in the area and available to come in and help out because someone somewhere called off of their shift and they needed an extra hand. Don't call people who are on vacation. Don't call people who it's their day off and it's their first day off in like 2 weeks. I'm a big believer in work-life balance, so this was a pretty big con for me from the start. It's kind of the norm. I disliked the unprofessionalism and the repercussions that would come with that unprofessionalism. I will leave it at that. Although management was a little bit crazy at certain points, I will say you learn pretty quickly as a barista to befriend your other barista counterparts. Making friends with your fellow baristas is where it's at. I am still really close friends with several baristas that I had worked with to this day. Baristas are amazing people. Yes, they get the rep of being hipsters and artists, but they're so cool to talk to. They're so cool to hang out around. And yes, the amount of conversations we have behind the counter about all of our tattoos, it's a lot. So if you have tattoos, you'll fit right in. Now listen, if your first tattoo is a tattoo of a coffee cup, that's okay. That's usually most baristas' first tattoos. No one's judging. But going off of my own personal experience, I can say that baristas are wildly unreliable. The amount of no-call, no-shows we had, people quitting on the spot, people just never showing up again, never heard from them again. We don't know if they quit, we don't know if they died, they just never showed up again. It's insanity. If you're in a crew of 4 people and one person calls off that day, well, that's 25% of the work that is now distributed to the other 3 people that did show up for their shift. Things happen, things arise, sometimes you just can't make it in for your shift, and that's totally acceptable and understandable. However, if you are no call, no showing multiple times a month, side eye. If someone doesn't show up for their shift and it's a quiet evening, well, that's water under the bridge. No harm, no foul. But most evenings, most times of the day at cafes are not quiet, especially if you work in a very heavily populated area or you work at a Starbucks drive-through store. There is no peace. In addition to that, because of that uncertainty, sometimes it's really difficult to get your shifts covered or to get them swapped out, etc. Whatever cafe you end up working at though, just take it from me, try to make friends with everybody on your crew, because your barista besties, they'll typically pull through for you. The rest of them, questionable. My next dislike is a non-barista related dislike. Pour overs. A pour over is a method of brewing coffee. Essentially what you do is you take coffee grounds, you put them in a paper filter, and you saturate the coffee grounds with piping hot water. The water will seep through the coffee grounds, through the paper filter, and will drip into the cup that you have underneath it, which step 1 is put the cup underneath it, otherwise you're gonna have a gigantic mess. I love pour overs. It's an excellent way to make coffee. It's fresh, it's tasty, but it's kind of a pain in the ass, I'm not gonna lie. And it takes a a ton of time to not only prepare, but to monitor, because you have to grind up the beans in a certain way. You have to watch it to make sure it doesn't overflow. And some of you might be thinking, maybe you've made a pour over at home and you're like, Stefania, pour overs only take a few minutes. Well, you're right. But the thing is that in a coffee shop, and especially at peak rush hours, a few minutes feels like a few hours. As a barista, you love pour overs, but simultaneously you also dislike them. Yes, we will do it, but don't act like you've never complained about an aspect of your job before, okay? I'm watching you. If you demand a pour over, so be it, we'll do it. Just know that your local barista is going to die a little bit inside when you order it, especially if there is a drive-through line wrapped around the building, especially if within that drive-through line there is a screaming, crying child. It's giving me agita just even thinking about it. This next one goes along with one from earlier, but understaffed happy hours and promotion days. Something that you'll hear pretty frequently as a barista is that we're understaffed or we're short on labor hours. Meanwhile, you're watching your manager hire people all the time for extra help, but where's that extra help when you actually need it? This was a huge dislike of mine. Always seeing people come through the door and get hired, but they were never there when we actually needed them to be, when we actually needed that additional person's help. Whenever we would ask about it, we would usually get met with some sort of response about labor shortages or being short on labor hours. Perhaps, and I'm no expert, but perhaps the cafe would make more money if we had an additional person or two there to increase output. But we don't, so we're forced to go at the pace that we're going, and at the same time, quality starts to slip because you're going so fast. Where's the quality aspect? Was it even a good cup of coffee that we just handed out, or are we just handing it to get someone out? And when we do try to focus on quality, people get angry, people get impatient, so it's kind of like a lose-lose scenario. As I said before, bestie, just prepare to pick up the slack of other people and poor management's decisions. Finally, my last dislike of barista life is one that I'm pretty sure a lot of you will be able to relate to, which sucks, but that's just the reality of it. A lot of you in the past that have viewed my other barista, Starbucks, cafe related videos are also in the same age group that I'm a part of. Full disclosure, if you are young, there is a high probability that you won't get treated with the same amount of respect at your cafe that someone who's a little bit older at your cafe may get treated with. When I first started at Starbucks, I was 16 years old, and thankfully the first store that I worked at, my crew was pretty young, but I was still the youngest person by a few years. My second store, my manager, which I realize this may not be legal, but my manager at the time, at that second store, she did not hire anybody who was under the age of 18. I was 17 at the time, and because I had prior Starbucks experience at another cafe, she had made an exception for me to come on the crew, but I was 17. I was the only person on that team that was under 18. The next youngest person ahead of me was 21, 25, 30, 40s. When I tell you that my age came up all the time, I mean it. So certain responsibilities weren't given to me out of hypothetical fear that I wouldn't be able to deliver on them because I was young. At the end of the day, I was the 17-year-old. I was still in high school. I was a senior in high school, and that's what I was labeled as. If you are young, beware. Some people might treat you like that, and it says nothing about you and everything about them. We all go through it. Don't get too down on yourself, and it's not your fault for being the age that you are at. And that, my friends, are the 7 things that I learned to dislike as a barista. The inconsistent schedule, the Karens, unprofessional management, picking up the slack, unreliable coworkers, and yes, pour overs. But you know what? At the end of the day, the free coffee trumps all of that. With all of the bad, there was a lot of good too, which we can get into another time on my channel. I'm pretty sure I've also talked about all of the good before, so there's a ton of videos you can go peep if you're looking for some positive after this. Cheers, my friends. Thank you for watching. Take it easy, subscribe to me, and I will see you guys next time. Cheers.